Next up, we have a fireside chat exploring how the 2028 Games can be a catalyst for community transformation and climate action. This fireside features CoMotion CEO John Rossant and former ambassador to India, not to mention former mayor of LA, Eric Garcetti.
How are you, Mr.
I'm
Ambassador,
good.
Mr. Mayor?
Nice
Eric.
to see you, Eric.
It's good to see you.
Good to see everybody as well.
Good. Now, what an honor to sit here with Eric Garcetti. Eric, of course, was the 42nd mayor of this great city from 2013 to 2022. Very consequential years for the city, a very consequential mayor. As mayor in 2016, of course, you led the campaign to approve Measure M, which was an extraordinary bill. We're living through the effects now, $120 billion over 40 years for transportation infrastructure, probably the largest of its kind, certainly in LA, probably the nation. And you were never shy about your vision, your broader vision for LA as the world capital of transportation technology, which is something we, of course, love at CoMotion. And so in 2017, when CoMotion was figuring out where to launch, that was a really easy answer.
And we thank you for that.
It had to be LA. So since then, of course, you've gone on to serve as U.S. ambassador to India, which gave you a kind of front row seat to see how cities in that part of the world are developing and are combating climate change. It's a very kind of different kind of context. So here in LA, this is an extraordinary trifecta of mega events. The World Cup this year, Super Bowl next year, and of course the Olympic and Paralympic Games in 28. It's, I think, an unprecedented trifecta for any city. So tell us a little bit about when moving back a few years, when you and your friend, former mayor Anne Hidalgo, who we just heard from, it's a joint award of the Olympic Games to Paris and LA in 24 and 28. What this sequence of events, the World Cup, Super Bowl, the Olympics, what does LA have to kind of get right in that sequence, according to you? How do you see it?
So I'm a LA kid. I'm a fourth generation Angelino. There's anybody longer than 4 generations here? I'm sure there's maybe a person or two. Like, we're a 63% immigrant or children of immigrant city. If you look at migrants in the U.S., it's like you get down to single digits that can even trace 2 generations back here. But I love LA, and I love the stories of hearing. I think it was Alan who said his father went to the 32 games. He went to the 84 games. His daughter is going to go to the 28 games. And I've been looking, by the way, if everybody can help me with this, for a baby that went to the 32 games that's still alive today that we can bring out and say they went to all 3. But I'm sure there's somebody demographically who's still alive in the city who will at least bridge those years together. But for me, you know, this is a city that has always been, and when we bid for the Olympics, about freedom, about our complete, you know, reflection of the world, our diversity. This is everybody's second home. And the idea of being a games changer, and that was the kind of pun that we used, that in 1932, we changed the Olympic Games. In 1984, we changed the Olympic Games. And in 2028, we're going to change the Olympic Games as the Olympics change us, and the Paralympics for the first time. And, you know, we could get into all sorts of detail that other people are focused on and can talk about in terms of what we need to do to be prepared. I want to inspire you as a room to think about what our collective role is, because I think 2 years out of every Olympics, I spoke recently at SCAG, the Southern California Association for Governments, and it's the 5 county governments for all of Southern California, or 6 counties, excuse me. And I said, let's just think about this year past and the stresses and the triumphs. The Dodgers win the World Series, war in the Middle East, unrest in Iran, oil prices going up, inflation, new partisanship, at the highest levels it's ever been, technology in our homes in ways we've never felt. And then I paused and I said, of course the year is 1982. Dodgers win in 1981. And the last piece is everybody said, we'll never pull off the Olympics. We're going to pull off the Olympics and the Paralympic Games. They're going to be a runaway success from a business, from a visitor's perspective. I have full confidence in the teams that are doing that. But everybody, including in Paris, 2 years out, always writes, because who wants to write, articles that city is well prepared, everything's going to be okay. Everybody starts to complain. Everybody starts to worry. And inevitably, something magical happens when the Olympics come here. And I witnessed that as a child. The entire world comes here. We've tasted that with the World Cup. We get it in a national sense during our hosting of the Super Bowls. We really figure out a way what these movements are about to break down all the things that divide us. So North Koreans and South Koreans have a meal together in the athletes' village. Israelis and Palestinians, compete on the same field in a peaceful way. You'll have folks that are able to, see what it means when we break down. I'll always remember when we were bidding a West African athlete who's now a member of the International Olympic Committee tell me what it felt like marching into his Olympic Games. And he said, we weren't as big or powerful or rich a country as America, but for a moment, all of us as human beings were equal. And so tap into your idealism and not into your negativism, which is really tough these days because the algorithms and autocrats live off of our division. But it's up to us to inspire the hope that comes out of what the ancient Olympic Games were and what the modern Olympic and Paralympic Games are all about, making this the most accessible city ever, celebrating the culture that's already here, making connections that we've never seen between countries. And if the Olympics is this golden child that every city wants, we're all standing around this golden child, and instead of raising it right now, I'm hearing a lot of people kind of cross their arms and say, well, I'm not going to feed this baby unless you give me what I want. I want less taxes, or a higher wage, or give me money for my cultural festival, or my neighborhood or city needs some events or things. And what Lacey has done so brilliantly is the Olympics aren't what you get out of them, they're what you give to them. We are a city. The Olympics is a vehicle, and the Paralympics is a vehicle for us to express our highest hopes and accelerate some of our biggest stretches. So I kind of say that the only thing we need to get ready for is each one of you in the business that you're in the government agency that you work at, in the city where you reside, figure out what you want to put into the Olympic bag, and I guarantee you, when we have that moment come here, it will be 10 times richer than if you wait for others to do it.
I think that deserves a hand of applause.
First time homework has gotten applause, right?
Yeah. Eric, you talked about 32 and 84 and the lasting legacies, the Coliseum, the infrastructure, with 84, the surplus that's funding youth sports in 40 years later until today. Let's say we're in the year 2038, 10 years after the games. What's the one thing you really want Angelenos to point to and say, this happened because of 28? So can you do that?
I think we overestimate and underestimate the impact of the games. Sometimes we underestimate when people are like, well, it's just a 2.5-week event followed by another 2-week event, and there's not really any legacy. Or others are like, we need to change the whole city. We need to clean up the entire city, build all the affordable housing that we need, get every transit line done, et cetera. Things that aren't in the purview of a privately run games, because we're the only country in the world that doesn't subsidize from our national government, except for some of the security reimbursements, are Olympics. We're the only country that doesn't have a minister of sports because all of our sports are funded privately. So don't overestimate what we can get out of it, but also don't underestimate. So let's go back in history. 1932, what happened to this city? Well, we had bid for the 1924 games, and lost, I think, maybe to Antwerp or someplace. Nobody knew where LA was, and the dirty little secret is we've never won a competitive bid for the Olympic Games, even though we're going to be the third city to host it for the third time. In 1932, a worldwide depression, nobody stepped up. And they said, why don't we give it to that city near Hollywood? They knew Hollywood, but they didn't know Los Angeles. And we literally were awarded it. So what did we do? Typical LA innovation. We built the first Olympic Village. We invented the Olympic podium. We had some of the very first, I think it was the first time China competed. We did the photo finish for the first time. It used to always just be done by eye. And we changed the games, but we left behind a whole neighborhood that is now a vibrant part of South Los Angeles. We were able to, in 1984, oh, and the other thing we did, by the way, is we took 10th Street, because it was the 10th Olympiad, as some of you know, and renamed it Olympic Boulevard. That's why it's called Olympic Boulevard now. In 1984, we said, oh, traffic sucks here. Half of us left, so it was the best time ever to be in LA. And we made Pico and Olympic one-way streets, that old 10th Street from the 32 games. We made it one way and traffic flowed. And unfortunately, we were never able to make that permanent, even though my predecessor tried due to community opposition and the usual things that we sometimes are very short-sighted about. But we had the first wheelchair race, which led to what the Paralympic movement became. We had, Rocket Man come down and show that aerospace legacy. But in terms of the city, we were thinking about an international terminal in preparation. We said, let's build it out, now the Tom Bradley Terminal. We were thinking about a subway, and in 1980, when we knew we got the games, we passed the first measure, you measure M, the first measure to tax ourselves for transportation that led to the building of the subway. It wasn't open by 84, but it was the legacy of 84. We didn't have an opera at the time. And so some folks came together, and Placido Domingo and others, and they put an opera together as part of the cultural festival. Peter Sellers, the great director, was the head of that, and LA got an opera. Now, would we have gotten an international terminal, a subway, and an opera if we didn't do the 84 games? Probably, but it could have been 5 to 10 to 20 years later. So think about that as the way, like when we're looking back 10 years after the games, what we want. I think we want to see a few things. I'm an advocate of this festival trails idea, which is all the bike paths and the connections that we have in Los Angeles that will get built out. Let's name them after the Olympics, connect them with whatever the visual leave-behinds are, like in 84 it was the pastels and the great design. Let's figure out a way to have gateways into each one of those neighborhood portals that goes into these pathways and bikeways and walkways and call it the Olympic Trail. Let's look at the housing crisis that we have. And in neighborhoods like Larchmont Village or Ventura Boulevard, let's zone it to be able to build housing above the existing stores to create walkable communities with zero parking requirements that are called the Olympic Villages. Let's figure out a way to use new technologies to get our big lines done quicker. I think the private sector can actually do some demos here, whether it's eVTOLs flying us around or whether it's what we're seeing the Boring Company and LA Company and others do to actually get out there. If you haven't been to Las Vegas recently and seen that, you remember New York's subway system, London's subway system was built privately. It became a public entity, which is good because fare recovery doesn't usually keep up the maintenance. But can you imagine if New York City didn't have a subway system today and we put the map forward and said we're going to bid this out in the American public procurement system? It would be 100 years and $1 trillion before New York has a subway. So let's get a little bit more LA libertarian about like figuring out, unleash creativity, demonstrate these things. Some of them will flop and some of them will fly. But I'd like to see that people could point back to 38, that it was almost like a world exhibition and at the same time an Olympic and Paralympic Games that left behind the best of LA.
Yeah, I mean, I think also the 28 game, the LA that will emerge from the 28 games will be, I think, such a different place, such a better place than it is now. And so much of that has to do about mobility and transportation. I mean, the build out, the LA Metro's historic build out. You just look at the thousands of autonomous vehicles already plying the streets, the Waymos, that will exponentially increase. We've talked this morning about the electrification that's sort of ongoing. So I'm so excited about that. You were ambassador in India, and you looked at these mega cities of the global south, very different budgets, different political context. And you saw, I guess, how they solve mobility and climate problems that LA is often still wrestling with. Are there any relevant learnings for Los Angeles that you picked up during your time in Delhi?
Absolutely, and I encourage everybody to go to India many times in your life. It is a place where there are double the number of souls that Europe contains. I always tell people when you think about India as a country, you're thinking about it wrong. It is a country, it's a nation state, but it is like if Europe became a single nation overnight and then doubled in population with all the language diversity, the cultural, the culinary, the religious diversity. And it is worlds upon worlds upon worlds. In India, I learned so much. I mean, first I learned to live life not very linearly. We think that progress is like this, and it's really a circle in India. I always loved the collision of Indian bureaucracy and American bureaucracy when we're like, is the deal done? They're like, I don't know, maybe. and we're going to come back to it, and we're going to wait you out, and we're going to negotiate, because we do everything retail, and everything there is a contested negotiation, so it's kind of part of the culture. But that said, it creates a lot of creativity and obviously more diversity than you can even think about in this room. But I learned a lot from the grassroots community-based strength that India has that I think we've lost in America. I think at times we've had it, but right now most of our activism is contained on our screens. You know, I saw some people on the freeway driving here, maybe some of you saw that, about the latest murder that happened on the hands of ICE. You know, occasionally you get people actually in 3 dimensions, but mostly we do it in safe spaces and places. In India, there's still that kind of, because everybody collides with each other, that block by block activism. There's a group called Siwa, which is the women's self-help group. There's 40,000 of them in India. And I was in Gujarat, in the capital of Ahmedabad, of that state, in western India, very, very hot. And of the 15 hottest cities in the world this summer, 15 of them were in India. I mean, if you've read the, you know, headlines, people are dying from the heat. They are stuck with the heat, on top of the pollution, on top of the rain and everything else. But there's a lot of women in the construction industry in India, many more than here. And I met with a bricklayer who is part of the Siwa chapter in where it was founded in Ahmedabad. And she said, you know, even with gloves on the hottest days in Gujarat, I can't hold the bricks. And when I can't hold the bricks, I can't work. And when I can't work, I can't feed my family. And my family needs my wages every day to eat, because we have nothing else. And it was a very sobering moment. And then I saw a couple months later, and we worked with a foundation and some others to figure out a way to do insurance, climate insurance for workers, where she would pay a small fraction when she does work into a fund that on the days it was too hot, estimated to be maybe 20 or 30 right now a year, that she would get her wages. You know, solutions like that, I think we've been talking about tons of carbon for so long, we forget to talk about safety, health, and economic prosperity. We need to like find a whole dialogue that gets away from what is adaptability with resilience. Like, I mean, we know in this room, but like an average person doesn't even understand what that word means. As people talk about abundance even and stuff, like you have ideas of stuff, but you need to talk about people about survival, about thriving, about their health, about their family. And I really learned that in India and got those ideas. The last thing I'll say is I also saw the scale of things. I felt like living in India was like living in America in the 1890s, or New York in the 1920s, or maybe London in the 1850s. We haven't lived through moments of mass, some of us who visited China in the last 20 years, but when the mass build-out happens, mistakes are made, sometimes it's done sloppily, but like India's building a big airport, 11 a year, so about 1 a month is opening. And we're trying to figure out, you know, how to renovate ours. When you look at rail lines, and you realize that we pay so much more for the model that we have here. And so it's great to see finally we got the Sepulveda Pass greenlit, and it said, and the possibility of an extension to LAX. I will live to see the first one open. Depending on the longevity movement, I'm probably going to be dead by the time it gets to LAX, unless we change the model. So it's really a stark choice for us that I saw, that I learned in India. Either you figure out a way to get to yes or you don't. You can figure out every well-intentioned stone on environmental micro law, on labor micro law, on community micro opposition, and that backpack becomes so heavy we just stop moving, or we figure out what defined LA. I'm more socially liberal than I've ever been. I'm more economically distributionist than I've ever been, but I'm also more libertarian on process than I've ever been. And I want to build a generation of activists and residents and even bureaucrats who figure out a way to get out of the way and figure out how the things that defined LA's greatness, whether it was the aerospace or whether it was the freeway system, which was cutting edge technology at the time, or the red cars that we had before, we have to get people who can build this at scale quickly, and our model doesn't.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, you know, this the Ezra Klein abundance theory. I totally subscribe to it. I think this has to percolate all around the Democratic Party going forward, absolutely. Let's thank Ambassador Mayor Garcetti. Thank you very much. And, you know, we're all benefiting from your vision.
Thank you.
And
hope you're inspired.
Thank you for it.
Let's do it.
Good.